Well, good morning everyone and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
Today we have a fun one for you. We have a 2018 Chevy Impala. You guys have been asking about this car. Now this might not be the video you're hoping for, but we're going to cover a lot of information today, so let's get to it. This particular Chevy Impala is in today for a subwoofer upgrade, which is what a lot of the times people do. You just add a sub amp into it. What we're gonna walk you through is the process of adding that amplifier, and it's gonna start over here at the laptop. But before we do that, let's look at the car, figure out what's inside of it, and we'll talk about what we're gonna put in it. First up, it has a touchscreen in the dash. It's push to start. We don't see any branded logos anywhere, meaning it doesn't say Bose, Infinity, Boston, Beats by, there's no branded logos anywhere. Looks like there's a provision for a speaker in the dash, and the door, the rear door here, and then also in the rear deck. When we come around into the rear deck though, we'll notice that there is no speakers there. It's just an empty hole. That's one thing we can tick off in our book. We know that there's no rear speakers and that it's not a branded system. The next step is to turn it on and actually listen to it and figure out what each speaker's doing. See if the speakers even exist. Like, we know there's nothing in the rear deck, but we don't know if there's anything in the dash or either of the doors. Turn the radio on, and for this we're gonna be using the EduCar Test and Tune app. The reason why we're gonna do that is because, for one, it has a bunch of tones, it has pink noise, it has all the things that we are going to need to figure out what's going on in this car. We're gonna select Tune real quick. That's gonna bring us to this page here. It's gonna play some pink noise. We just wanna play that first to see what speakers are in the car. Put your ear up into the dash. There's a speaker there. There's a speaker there. That might be a subwoofer. There's a speaker there. We know we have at least 6 speakers in the car. There's no grill up here for a center channel, so we don't have to worry about that. We can then switch to bass, and that is only gonna play bass frequencies. You have mid bass, a mid, and treble. Playing the treble, I can hear that coming from the dash. If I switch back to bass, I get nothing coming out of the dash, but the door is all of a sudden making sound. Go back to treble. There's absolutely nothing come out of here. A little bit of sound playing mid. Mid bass is making noise, but bass is thundering. My guess is that's a subwoofer. Heading to the back speaker, playing treble. Clear as day. That one's definitely playing treble. I'm gonna skip to the mid bass, and I have mid bass too. I'll go to bass. It's there, but it's definitely not as loud as the front one is. So what we've just quickly figured out is that this up in the dash is crossed over for high frequency. This is crossed over for low frequency. And the one in the rear here, though it sounds like it has some form of a high pass filter, for the most part is full range. Now we'll validate this with an RTA, but if you don't have one of those, this is a quick, easy way to test and see what is going on in the car. With that information in hand, that's leading me to believe that there's some form of an amplifier in here, because typically a radio doesn't have the 3-way active crossover built into it. And if there's an amplifier in here, there might be a bypass. That's why I said we're gonna start here at the laptop. The first place we wanna visit is pack-audio.com. And the reason for that is because they make a product called the AmpPro. The AmpPro is designed to work in conjunction with a factory amplifier, giving us RCA outputs for things like subwoofers, front high pass, rear high pass, front, rear, and sub. But in this case, since we're only adding a subwoofer, the nice thing is that it will allow us to keep that factory amplifier in place, playing the factory mids and highs, as well as giving us a subwoofer output. There's also the iData interface, or the AR, but that's an amp replacement interface. So with that, we'd have to take the factory amplifier out. By taking the factory amplifier out, we don't have an amplifier to play the mids and highs, so that really wouldn't be a solution for this. And then you have metraonline.com. They make a similar solution as the AmpPro in the sense that their piece will usually do high level, low level, or amplifier integration, but then it's tied to their DSP, which isn't the end of the world. You could DSP the subwoofer, and you'd have the option, just like with the AmpPro, to add in amplifiers at a later date. Then there's the Nav TV Zen product. Works similar to the AmpPro, and in this case is made for the Bose system. The nice thing about the AmpPro piece is that the AmpPro is designed for Bose and non-Bose, as long as there's a MOS bus in the car. Don't worry, we'll show you how to check for that. Because of the criteria in which we've just described, we're gonna look at the pack piece. Typing in your make, model, and year, we can select Refine Search, click the audio interfacing, and that'll bring up two products, the AP Sub GM61 and the AP GM61. The AP Sub GM61 is a new product that they've just come out with, and the idea behind it is, instead of buying the full-blown AmpPro that has front, rear, and sub output like we just talked about, it is designed specifically to just do a subwoofer output, which is exactly what we're doing in this car. I think we should click on that and see what it says. Click on Documents. This is going to launch the instruction manual for us. We want to read that because in the top of all the pack audio instructions is they give you all the disclaimers, warnings, and anything that you should know going forward. If there's special notes on your car, they're typically here. This interface is compatible with vehicles with or without Bose that are required with an IO4, IO5, or IO6 model radio. That's the first tick on this that we need to verify. To do that, General Motors is located right here. That's a QR code, so to access that, we just simply need our phone. Select your camera, come down, scan it, drag down, and that'll launch your build code. And what we're looking for in this is the IO4, 5, or 6. On the fifth line down, the second input, we see IO5. Perfect. Naturally, we keep going as far as reading the notes. In some non-Bose radios, there may be absence of audio from the left channel when the AM, FM, or XM source. The AP Sub is capable of providing a workaround by bypassing the right audio through the left and right channels. Basically what they're saying is that if you don't have any sound on the left channel, you flick dip switch number 3 and it'll mirror the left channel over to the right channel, which is fine. It's a subwoofer, we're golden there. Plus it's only on AM, FM, and XM. All your portable media, such as the stuff coming off your phone, is going to be in perfect stereo. So read through all these. Your remote output is only rated for 2 amps, which means it's enough to turn on one thing. Anything past that, add a relay. And if we scroll down, it gives us basic parts as far as what is in the kit. This is an ANC bypass harness here on the bottom, the T harness for at the radio tuner. Scroll down. Troubleshooting is that dip switch 3, and then it gives us the location for the radio tuner. Something to note, most cars nowadays, the radio isn't located up there at the screen. The screen is just the command center, and there's an external brain somewhere else. In this case, it says the Chevy Impala is above the passenger kick panel. So we don't even have to pull the dash bar. We just got to drop down the passenger side of the dash, and we can access the plugs we need to plug in there. It gives us a breakout of what the factory tuner looks like. There's 2 harnesses plugged in. Keep scrolling down, and then we see that ANC harness here. And if we look for our car, Chevy Impala, passenger side of trunk is where the factory amplifier is, so that will get plugged in back there. For the most part, that's all we need to know. I'm gonna go next door and see if we have the Sub AmpPro in stock, what we'll be using to do this installation. This will streamline the installation. We won't have to go back to the amplifier and figure out all that nonsense. However, because not every installation is going to be this straightforward, we are still going to go back to the back amplifier, and I'm going to kind of walk you through the process that we would have done had there not been an AmpPro. We had one in stock. Let's see what comes in the box. The main brain box is designed to take the digital signal coming from the factory radio and out to the amplifier, converting it over to RCAs. This is not a high level to low level adapter. If we pop the top, we can see there's no resistors in here. This is 100% tech. Dip switches here on the side. We'll wait and see how that sounds when we're done. We'll balance left and right to make sure we have sub on both. The instruction manuals we just looked at online. Subwoofer level control, so if your amplifier does not have a bass knob, this does come with one. The T harness for at the tuner brain, and the ANC bypass harness for back at the amplifier. we go and get into the kick panel, install that in the car, we want to do the testing back at the amplifier for the situation if this harness didn't exist, or if for some reason you didn't just buy this harness in the first place, which would make more sense just to buy it and get the perfect signal, because it's going to give you a full frequency output. It's tapping in before the amplifier and giving you a full subwoofer output, meaning it's going to play all the way down. There's no bass roll off, there's no EQ. It is the crystal clear, perfect signal that is coming out of the factory radio before the amplifier, which is in turn the amplifier, as you'll see, is manipulating the sound and changing it, EQing it as it were. Let's get some tools and let's take a look at that. Some of the tools we'll be using to do our testing is a handheld RTA, a tone generator, polarity tester, and the all-important digital multimeter. The digital multimeter is the most important one of these tools. If you don't have one and you're in the 12-volt world, well, you need to go get one and buy a decent one. I mean, you can get a cheap one for like 20 bucks, spend a little bit more and get a little better one. In this corner of the car is the factory amplifier. There are 4 plugs attached to it. Looking at this plug here, we can see these 2 giant wires on the end and then some fatter wires in the middle. I feel like these 2 here are going to be our power and ground for the amplifier. To test that, we'll set our digital multimeter to DC, which is the line with the dashes beneath it, probing the ends of the amplifier. We can see we have 13 volts. These indeed are the power and ground for the amplifier. The next step is to figure out what these next 2 wires are. The goal of what you're trying to do here is figure out what every wire in the plug is for. Some wires you're not going to be able to do that. Some wires you can. The wires that you can, you want to know, because then you have less mystery. Using our digital multimeter again, we'll switch it to ohm. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want to measure for speakers to see if these 2 are in fact speakers. We get a 2.3 ohm load on the first set and a 2.3 ohm load on the second set. So if these are indeed speakers, they're 2 ohm speakers, which is something, if we're going to replace them and keep the factory amplifier, going with a 4 ohm speaker might be a bad idea. But we still don't know which speakers they are yet. For that, we will take our tone generator. We hear sound, so we know it's a speaker. Let's go figure out which one it is. Passenger front door. My guess is that the other one is the driver's front door. And it is. We know what this harness is for power and ground, and for the front 2 speakers that are 2 ohm, and we also suspect are subwoofers. Plug the amp back in. I'm going to use the RTA to find out if they are in fact subwoofers. To do that, I'm going to play some peak noise. Look at the RTA here. This side of the meter is highs. This side of the meter is low pass. It is definitely playing low pass. We can also see the high pass filter and low pass filter that they've applied. It's a band pass filter. It has some form of a subsonic filter built into it to roll that bass frequency off to limit the performance of those speakers in the door so that they don't blow. If it's giving you enough information for the sub enclosure you want to connect to it, you're golden. I want to figure out what kind of output voltage is coming out of that factory radio. To do that, we're going to switch over to the digital multimeter. We're going to put it to AC, which is the volts with a squiggly line above it. We need a frequency that we're going to play. We also need a frequency that we're going to play that falls somewhere into the range that that RTA showed us, meaning the lowest frequency and the highest frequency. We want to be somewhere in that middle. If you don't have an RTA, you can use a tone generator app and play like 50 hertz, 60 hertz, 70 hertz. Take voltage readings all across the board and see which one is the highest. That's what you're looking for, the highest voltage output. For this, I'm going to start at 50 hertz and see what kind of output voltage it gives us there. For this, you're going to need 2 people, one to work the volume knob and the other one to look at the digital multimeter. And go, Fernando. 8.71 volts. Now we'll move up to 60 hertz. 8.62 volts. Let's try going down to 40. Looking at 40, we can see it starts to go down. Let's try 80. So right between 50 and 60 is where we got our highest reading, but it's 8 volts nonetheless. That means we want an amplifier that can handle at least 10 volts of high level input. You want to make sure you have some leeway. As you can see there, it fluctuates a little bit. Plus you might have something that has a lot of loudness in the recording, which could overdrive. 10 volts would be a minimum. The last test we want to do, since we have the voltmeter hooked up, is see if there's DC offset. DC offset is going to be what is going to create our remote turn on for us. Most amplifiers amplifiers nowadays have some form of DC offset trigger. Even high level to low level adapters have DC offset triggers built into it. It's a 6-volt DC that comes over your speaker lines. It's there all the time. You don't hear it. It doesn't affect anything. To do this test, put your meter to DC, leave the positive probe connected to the amplifier, take your ground and go to a ground source in the car. And you'll see that 6 volts. The radio's on right now. Turn the car off. As you notice, the 6 volt is still there. DC offset is connected to the data bus in the car. Your radio puts out chimes and all kinds of things when the car is off. This doesn't turn on and off with the key. It turns off with the data in the car. This can stay active for up to 3 minutes in some cases. It's okay though. The reason why it's like that, if you have a Highs amplifier hooked up and you have warning chimes and beeps and all these things that happen once you unlock the car and get in, if the system was off, you wouldn't hear those things. Let's say you left your headlights on and you don't have auto headlight off for some strange reason. You turn the car off and that chime shuts off. You don't know your headlights are on. You come out to a dead battery. That's just how DC offset is designed to work. This amplifier is on, so the output is on. After a couple minutes, you can go back and test it, and as you can see, it's off. This one stays on for about 30 seconds. The nice thing about it is it will always work. Always there. It's just like a remote turn on. It's a super reliable way of doing things. Personally, a big fan. If you were just adding a subwoofer, you can pretty much be done at this point. You know everything you need to know about adding a subwoofer. If you're not doing just a sub amp, then you're going to want to know what the rest of the amplifier has in store for you. The next plug on this has 8 wires, and we need to figure out what those 8 wires do. We want to do the same test on these 8 wires and figure out what they are. Since we already know that the main power for the amplifier is in the harness below, that doesn't mean we shouldn't still check for power. Sometimes there's multiple things going into the amplifier, but it's best just to be thorough. Put our meter back to DC and probe each one of those connectors to see if in fact they put out any power. While connected to test for DC, switch it over to ohms and see if you get an ohm load read. In this case we do. We get 2.4. And do that to all 4 of them. 2.4, no voltage. After testing every speaker, clearly this car is all 2 ohm. If I was going to do any upgrade in this, I would definitely be putting a Highs amplifier in it as well to make sure I keep my power. These all look like speakers because we're not getting any voltage, but we are seeing the ohm load. Next step is to tone generate them and see what we have. First one up, let's go see where that is. That is the driver's rear door. That's a set of the greens here. I'm gonna go see where that is. All right, that is the passenger rear. Sounds like the driver's front. Driver's front. This has to be the passenger front. So it goes driver's rear, passenger rear, driver's front, passenger front. Moving on to the next test, we're gonna take a look at what these things are doing on the RTA. For that, we'll play pink noise again. This is the frequency coming out of the dash speakers. They are actively crossed over, and there is some form of an EQ on them. The rear speaker, some form of a crossover, both high and low, and has an EQ on it for sure. If we were to grab the rear speakers or the dash speakers to connect the subwoofer, subs wouldn't work. That's why you have to be real careful as far as what speaker you're grabbing. That gives us all our speaker information. So our output side, we've got it all. We know how many speakers are in the car. We found all of them. We know what it looks like, what signal's coming out of them. The only thing we haven't tested on those is if we are going to be integrating into those, we need to know the polarity of those speakers. We need to know which wire is positive and which wire is negative. And that's where the PT9A Plus comes in, which is a polarity checker. And this is going to do that for us. What this is designed to do is tell us the polarity in pretty much any given situation. In this case, we can unplug this from the amplifier, which means we can plug this directly into the speaker wire. If you listen carefully, you're hearing a popping sound coming from the front mid bass. Looking over here, I have my positive in the yellow and my negative in the yellow black. If you have 2 of these, you can leave this one back here and run up front and test it. If you have one of them, by lengthening the speaker wire out so where you can take this up to the front, you can test it there as well. And the tip of this is a microphone. Testing it, we have a positive. If it was the other way, that red light would come on. We can write down on our notes that yellow is positive, yellow black is negative. And that's a pretty cool way of doing it. However, what if that speaker was blown and we still needed to know what it is? Well, now we have a different issue. because we need to know which wire is positive and negative, but we don't have a speaker to see how it's moving. No problem. This has an output here. You can plug this in to your radio via the aux jack, or you can download a polarity pop track to your phone, or this actually comes with a thumb drive that you can plug into the USB. There's several ways that it comes with in order for you to get the popping sound to come out of the radio into those wires. So this is going to go positive, positive, negative, positive, positive, negative. And we're metering the signal that's coming out of the radio, not the speaker. We've gotten the same information. We still know that yellow is positive and yellow black is negative. If you test all those speakers, write it all down, now you know how to hook up your high level to low level adapter and making sure you have the polarity correct. Check every speaker. What a lot of manufacturers will do is they'll stagger. It'll be like positive, negative, and then they'll flip one. And then that'll totally screw everything up. You don't have one of these, and you're like, how do I do this? It is gonna be more difficult. You will need a functioning speaker. So let's say the driver works and the passenger doesn't. Switch the two, put that functioning speaker over there. You can take a small 9-volt battery and tap the speaker. The speaker will either move out or the speaker will move in. If it moves in, it's backwards. If it moves out, it's correct. In this case, we didn't have to do any of this testing because we have the AmpPro, which is going to plug in and take care of all of this for us. That signal is going to be flat. Don't need to worry about any of that. It's going to plug in and give us the signal output that we need up front, not back here. Because we have the AmpPro, we didn't need to do any of this testing. It's going to plug in and give us the signal output that we need up front, not back here. Let's do that. Let's go up front, get this AmpPro plugged in, and we'll take a look at what's coming out of the AmpPro and why that's a better way to do it. Here we are in the passenger footwell. Right here is the radio. I know, right? Weird. There's two harnesses that we need to get to, and they're not gonna be easy. There's one right here, and there's one right over here. We have to unplug both of those because these ends are going to T-harness into them. They have these little red clips that you can kind of see, and those clips have to come down so that you can squeeze the little terminal here. A pick tool or some form of a pry tool is gonna be the best way to do it. And they're not made to be easy. There's one. You can do it, man. Ah. And there's the other one. I like to plug into the amplifier first. Lock the red clip into place. And our T-harness is in. This end here goes off to the AmpPro. What you'll notice is this little blue-white wire here is your remote turn on. Plug it in, red light comes on, does a few flashings, turn the car on, we get a red power light. I want to play some pink noise to make sure all the other speakers are still functioning. As I turn up and down the volume, you'll notice this will blink. All the speakers are still playing, which is cool. It's exactly what's supposed to happen. We're gonna take our RTA and plug it into this and see what that looks like. The Sub Pro is actively crossed over. Not going to be a full frequency output, so you can't just use this to feed into a DSP. It's only going to be good for a subwoofer. That's why it's called a Sub Pro. But compared to what we saw last time coming out of the factory, as you can see, there's no subsonic filter on this. It's playing all the way down, and it's as close to flat as possible. This is what's coming out of the radio. No EQ, no nothing. Just super sexy output. What we have to check for is whether or not we need to put on dip switch 3, meaning does left and right work. Simple enough to do with the RTA. You can also do it with a digital multimeter. You don't have to have an RTA, you just are looking for voltage on both sides, which I'll show you. RTA, one side, other side. So we're good, we don't have to deal with dip switch 3. We have a left and right output. Not that we really need it, it's a mono amp. I mean, it's not necessary. Let's see what that looks like with a digital multimeter. It's playing static, so almost like a pink noise, but you can see it's fluctuating just a little bit. You can turn the volume down. You can see now it's less. Turn the volume up. This is how you can check to see variable voltage. Go over to the next terminal. It is also giving us voltage output. The last thing you can test if you feel the need to is your remote turn on output here. If for some reason you're like, my amps won't turn on, take your digital multimeter, put it to DC, line with the dots, one end of the probe to ground, the other end into the wire here, and you'll see we get a nice 12.46 volts of output. And that's it. That's all the testing we need to do. Which testing would you like to do? Spend 5 minutes on your laptop trying to figure out if they make an adapter for it, or go through all the testing we just did in the back there? Laptops seem like a way cooler idea for sure. Now, most of these companies do have tech support that you can call, so if there's something you don't understand, like will this work in my car, and you've read them, make sure you read them before you call tech support, because a lot of the times something simple, will this work in my car? Did you see where it said it was an IL5? Then it'll work in your car. Those questions can be answered fairly easily. Fernando has been working on the amplifier, getting that wired up to go in this car the whole time. Let's enjoy watching a nice time lapse of that. Then we'll hop in the car and see how this thing sounds adding in the subwoofer. With the harness plugged into the dash, that leaves us with just this piece left over, which is the ANC bypass, or automatic noise canceling. When adding a subwoofer to a vehicle equipped with ANC, the ANC system will attempt to cancel out the bass frequencies being generated by the aftermarket subwoofer. This will result in unwanted noise being produced by the factory speakers. What happens is it creates this perpetual it just keeps getting louder, and it's the most terrible thing ever. Think of it as noise canceling headphones, but not that cool. To figure out if your car has it or not, most of the time there's locations for the microphones in the doors or the headliner. To use this, access the factory amplifier in the trunk, like we've been working on. Disconnect the 16-pin factory harness. It isn't one that we've been working with, it's the next one up. Unplug it, plug this in, and then plug the amplifier back into it. What this will do is this will take the ANC wire out of the equation. Everything will work the way it's supposed to, it's just going to shut off those microphones and allow you to put in a subwoofer. Let's head into the car. This is the harness they are referring to here. Plug in, plug back in, and you're done. Good job, Fernando. Looking clean. Amplifier's in, subs are in, bass knob is in. It's time to turn it up, put the rubber to the road, see how this thing sounds. Keep in mind you still have to set your gains and do all that fun stuff just like you normally do. And there you have it, bass. Isn't that what they all want, Fernando?
Boom, just like that.
Just like that, it's magical. And with that, Fernando.
On to the next one, guys.
We hope you guys enjoyed this one. We hope you learned something from it. You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you there next time.
Bye.
Bye. Look at that, battery's almost getting ready to die.
Woo!
Perfect timing. Woohoo, hell yeah.